What do you do when your family hands you a gift that isn't a gift at all, but a quiet, ribbon-wrapped dismissal on my 29th birthday? I stood in our suburban dining room, fingers still tracing the bow on a sleek, black suitcase, as my father's words landed like a stone pack tonight. Be gone by morning. The air felt thin, the chandelier's light too sharp, and my sister's giggle, high and careless, cut deeper than the command itself. I'd bought a chocolate cake that afternoon, a small, hopeful thing with curling plastic letters, thinking we might still be a family that marked days like this. It sat untouched on the table, a silent witness to the moment I began to unravel. The dining room smelled of roasted garlic and my mother's lavender perfume, a strange mix of warmth and artifice. We'd gathered at the oak table, the one I'd helped refinish as a teenager, its scratches now hidden under a cream tablecloth. My parents sat across from me, dressed as if for a church luncheon, Mom in a navy blouse, Dad in a pressed collared shirt. Lily, 23 and radiant, lounged in her chair, her manicured nails tapping her phone. The suitcase sat in the center, its glossy surface catching the light like a warning. I'd thought, foolishly, it might mean a trip, a rare family gesture. Wow, I said, voice catching as I lifted the lid. Are we going somewhere? Their laughter wasn't warm, nor cruel, just hollow, like I was the last to understand a joke told long ago. You are, Dad said, folding his napkin with precision. Mom leaned forward, her smile thin as a paper cut. Pack your things. Sienna, you're leaving tomorrow. I blinked, hands still on the suitcase's handle, the room tilting slightly. Lily's giggle bubbled again, and I saw her smirk, half hidden behind her water glass. The cake, its frosting smudged from the car ride, seemed to mock me from its place between the place settings. I'd stopped at the grocery store after work, picking it out with care, imagining us sharing slices, maybe even laughing. No one had glanced at it. Okay, I said, because what else was there? My voice sounded distant, like it belonged to someone else. They didn't raise their voices or offer reasons. Mom's eyes flicked to Dad, then back to me, her expression not unkind but settled, as if this had been rehearsed. Dad cleared his throat, the sound he made before delivering news about budgets or car repairs. We've discussed it. He said, it's time for what I wanted to ask. But my throat tightened, and Lily's phone buzzed, pulling her attention. I sat there, the suitcase's weight pressing into my thoughts, and realized they'd stopped seeing me as their daughter long before this moment. I was a tenant whose lease had expired, and a line item was crossed out. That night, I lay in the twin bed I'd slept in since high school, the pale green walls closing in. Downstairs, I heard them laughter, the clink of forks, probably eating my cake. I stared at the ceiling, counting the plaster cracks like a rosary, trying to piece together when I'd become invisible. The suitcase loomed in the corner, too clean, too new, a stranger in my room. I didn't cry, I didn't scream, I just felt the truth settle in. Cold and sharp, this wasn't about space or money, it was about a choice they'd made without me. At sunrise, I packed clothes, a secondhand laptop, and a photo of me at 20, grinning with my first paycheck. They were still asleep when my Uber pulled up. I shut the door softly, leaving no note, knowing they'd only notice I was gone when the next bill came due. 2 years before that suitcase shattered my world, I had a life that felt like mine, fragile but real. I was 27, living in a one-bedroom apartment above a nail salon in a noisy corner of the city, where the air always smelled faintly of acetone and sesame oil from the takeout place next door. The walls were thin, the beige carpet worn to threads, and the hot water flickered like a shy friend. But I loved it. It was mine rented. Yes, but paid for with every cent I earned. I'd sit at my wobbly kitchen table, a thrift store find, and picture a future home nothing grand. Just a place with a small kitchen window where sunlight could spill in. A lock only I held the key to. That dream kept me steady, a quiet pulse beneath my days. I worked as a project coordinator, a job that paid just enough to cover rent, groceries, and the occasional repair for my 2009 Honda Civic, a car held together by duct tape and stubborn hope. I packed lunches, tuna sandwiches, Apple slices, reused coffee filters, and bought clothes from consignment shops. Every dollar saved was a brick in that imagined house. I'd scroll through online listings late at night, deleting items from my cart to stay on budget, whispering to myself, someday. It wasn't glamorous, but it was honest, and I was proud of it, even if no one else noticed. Sunday dinners at my parents' suburban house were my tether to family. Though they always left me hollow, I'd drive the 40 minutes from the city, my Civic rattling over potholes, to sit at that same oak table. Lily, 6 years younger and somehow light years ahead in confidence, would breeze in with something new, a Gucci tote she needed for college, a smartwatch that cost more than my rent. Look, Sienna, she'd say, dangling a bracelet. Mom got me this for acing my midterm. I'd smile, nod, while Mom sighed, her eyes flickering between us like she wished we'd swap places. God, are you still wearing that sweater? Lily once laughed, pointing at my faded cardigan. I shrugged, saying nothing. But the sting lingered. Mom never commented on Lily's spending or my thrift. Sometimes she'd touch my hand, a fleeting gesture, and I'd think, she sees me. Other times, she'd look through me, exhausted by my presence. Dad was worse, buried in his phone or muttering about work, never asking about mine. I kept showing up, bringing side dishes I'd made on a budget, hoping someone would say, Sienna, we're proud of you. That moment never came. Instead, I'd drive back to my apartment, the city lights blurring through my windshield, telling myself it was just a phase, that family meant patience. I wasn't naive, but I believed in steady effort. I'd grown up watching my parents navigate lean years, always pulling through. I thought my role was to be the reliable one, the one who didn't ask for much. Lily lived on a different planet. Her Instagram filled with beach trips and coffee dates, her room a shrine to designer labels. I didn't envy her, not exactly, but I wondered how we diverged so sharply. Once, as I cleared the dinner table, I overheard Mom tell Lily, "Don't worry about the cost. We'll figure it out." I paused, sponge in hand, waiting for a similar softness aimed at me. It never came. Back in my apartment, I'd lie on my secondhand couch, the springs creaking, and stare at the ceiling's water stain, shaped like a lopsided heart. I'd think about that kitchen window, how it would frame a life I'd built alone. I didn't need much a place to breathe, to be seen. My lease renewal came every year, and I signed it with a kind of reverence, each signature a promise to myself. I was building something, slowly, quietly, and I thought it was enough. But as I'd learn, no amount of effort could make a family love you if they'd already decided you were expendable. The Sunday pot roast was still in the oven, its savory warmth curling through the house, when my father's voice cut through the haze of clinking silverware. "We need to talk," he said, eyes fixed on his plate, his jaw tight with the weight of something inevitable. My mother folded her napkin into sharp creases, her fingers trembling just enough to betray her calm. I set my fork down. The dining room's familiar wallpaper, faded roses climbing toward the ceiling, suddenly stifling. They told me about the layoffs, how the company had gutted his department, leaving us teetering on the edge of a mortgage we couldn't carry. "Would you consider moving back?" my mother asked, her voice soft but deliberate. "Just for a bit, to help us through." I felt a warning flicker in my chest, a whisper that returning might trap me. But their faces, her red-rimmed eyes, his slumped shoulders, my sister's uncharacteristic stillness pulled me in. I said yes, because family, I thought, meant showing up. I gave notice on my apartment, the one I'd loved despite its quirks, and packed my life into a storage unit off the highway, where my thrift store table and creaky couch gathered dust. The bedroom I returned to, once my sanctuary with its pale green walls, was no longer mine. My sister had turned it into a walk-in closet, her silk dresses draped along the walls like a museum of her whims. They'd cleared just enough space for a twin bed, its frame wedged between shoe racks. That first night, I lay awake, the faint scent of her jasmine perfume clinging to the air, and told myself this was temporary. My father's promise, just until I'm back on my feet, echoed in my mind. A lifeline I clung to as I stared at the ceiling's familiar cracks. I set up a monthly transfer of $1, $800 to my mother's account. Watching the numbers drain from my savings like water from a cracked bucket. It went to the mortgage, utilities, my sister's college tuition or so, I assumed. I never asked for receipts. And they never offered thanks. At first, there were small gestures. My mother made chicken pot pie, my favorite. Its crust golden and flaky. My father called me his rock, his hand briefly on my shoulder. My sister even asked about my job once. Her voice distracted but curious. I held on to those moments, fragile as they were, believing they meant we were still a family. But gratitude erodes fast in a house where roles are set. By the second month, the pot pie stopped appearing. My father's new job, less pay. Longer hours came and went without a conversation about my leaving. Just a little longer, my mother said one evening, her tone more expectation than request. I nodded, swallowing the question I didn't dare ask. How much longer? The house felt like a stage where I played a ghost. My sister's laughter filled the rooms. Her new purchases, a smartwatch. A leather jacket paraded at dinners I no longer felt welcome at. My mother's sighs grew sharper when I left dishes in the sink. As if my presence was a burden, my father barely spoke. His attention lost in bills or the TV's hum. I kept giving, kept transferring, kept hoping they'd see me again. I'd walk past my old bedroom door, now half blocked by a rack of her coats, and feel the space I'd once claimed shrinking. The kitchen, where I'd once pictured my window, was theirs, filled with her snack packs and my mother's herbal teas. I told myself I was helping, that this was what love looked like, quiet, unasked for sacrifice. But as the months blurred, I began to wonder if love was supposed to feel this hollow, this one-sided, this much like disappearing. The shift was so gradual, I barely noticed until it was undeniable. My father's new job stretched into months. Yet the $1, $800 I sent each month vanished without a word of relief. My baths, once a small refuge, were deemed wasteful. My mother's glance at the water bill carried a silent accusation. Dinners, once a ritual of lasagna and shared stories, morphed into whatever my sister craved: quinoa bowls. Sushi takeout, while my contributions went unmentioned. Her new shoes, glossy and impractical, clicked across the hardwood as she flaunted them, while my sneakers, their soles thinning, carried me to work and back. I didn't ask where her money came from, but the question gnawed at me, especially when my shampoo bottle emptied faster than I could afford to replace it. It was a Friday, my body heavy from a week of overtime on a last-minute project. When the fracture came, I trudged into the house, craving only a hot shower and the worn pages of my book. Instead, my sister was waiting at the foot of the stairs, her eyes bright with expectation. "I need $700, she said, as if it were as simple as borrowing a pen. I set my bag down, exhaustion sharpening my voice. For what, she huffed, tossing her hair. "My beach trip is next weekend. 2 hotel rooms, 3 nights. Everyone's paid their share. I just need yours." The absurdity of it, her assumption. Her ease snapped something inside me. "You think I have $700 lying around?" I said, keeping my tone low but firm. "I give $1, $800 every month to this house. I drive a car that's falling apart. My shoes have holes. And you want me to fund your vacation?" Her smile vanished, replaced by a scowl. "Why are you so dramatic?" "It's just money," I laughed, the sound bitter and unfamiliar. "No, it's not. It's weeks of overtime. Skipped meals. Saying no to everything I want so you can live like this." Her eyes welled, but the tears felt rehearsed. "You're calling me lazy," she wailed, her voice carrying down the hall. My parents appeared, summoned by her sobs, my mother's arms wrapping around her as if I'd struck her. "What's going on?" my father demanded, his jaw clenched. I stood my ground, voice shaking but steady. "She asked for $700 for a trip?" I said no. My mother's gaze turned icy. "And you told her to get a job?" I exhaled. I told her the truth. My father's voice was a blade. "That's not your place." I looked at them, their anger a wall, her smug tears peeking through her hands. "This house runs on my paycheck." I said, "I think I've earned a say." My mother's words cut deepest every time we ask for anything. "You throw your money in our faces." That was when I knew they didn't love me. They needed me. Until they didn't. The suitcase came the next day, my birthday, wrapped in a bow that mocked my hope. I packed in silence, left at dawn, and found a hostel where the air smelled of Lysol and burnt toast. For the first time in months, I could breathe. After 2 nights, I texted Carol, my coworker with a sharp tongue and a softer heart. She didn't pry, just offered her couch and strong coffee. At her apartment, I let the tears come quiet, steady, like a faucet finally unstuck. "You don't owe them your life," she said, handing me a blanket. And those words cracked open a truth I'd buried. A week later, I signed a lease on a studio apartment. It's linoleum peeling, but mine. I furnished it with secondhand treasures, a mattress with a faint stain, a desk with wobbly legs, a lamp whose shade tilted like a drunk. Each item was a stitch in a life I was sewing back together. I made tea in a chipped mug, drank it barefoot on the cold tile, and smiled. The taste sharper than any meal in that house. 6 months passed, my savings creeping upward without the monthly drain. I packed lunches again, washed dishes by hand. But now it was my choice, not their demand. The silence of my studio was kind, not heavy, and for the first time, I felt solid, like a shadow stepping into light. The quiet of my studio apartment, with its slanted lamp and chipped mugs, felt like a fortress until the phone rang one gray afternoon. An unknown number piercing the calm. I hesitated, thumb hovering over the screen, but curiosity won. My mother's voice, syrupy and practiced, spilled through. "We need to talk," she said, as if no suitcase had ever sat between us. "Can you come by?" I leaned against the counter, the tile cold under my bare feet, and said, "No, say it now." A pause, then her sigh, heavy with performance. "Your father's job is gone again. Layoffs. The bank's talking foreclosure. We're drowning." The words were meant to pull me back, but they only sharpened the edges of my resolve. "I'm not coming back," I said, voice steady as granite. "Never." Her tone tightened, a thread of guilt woven in. "You're our daughter." I laughed, sharp and brief. "You should have thought of that when you treated me like a bank account with a pulse." I hung up, and the silence that followed was cleaner than any I'd known in their house. But they didn't stop. Texts came next, please, then demands. Each number unfamiliar but reeking of their desperation. My sister's voicemail was the worst. Her voice soft with crocodile tears. "I miss you. We need you." I deleted it, my finger trembling, not with doubt but with the weight of finally refusing. Then an email arrived, formal and cold, from a lawyer claiming I owed $24,000 for unpaid room and board over 2 years. The audacity was almost artful, but it didn't scare me, it lit a fire. I called James, a lawyer friend whose wit matched his precision. He didn't flinch, drafting a response that same day. A blade of logic and evidence. He attached bank records, $200 in transfers, $800 each month, sent without fail to their account. He described the half closet I'd slept in, the bills I'd paid without a contract, and the eviction delivered on my birthday. His final line was a checkmate. "We are prepared to counterclaim for the full amount plus legal fees and emotional damages." 3 days later, their lawyer's reply was a single sentence, retreating like a scolded dog. "My clients will not proceed." I thought that was the end. But fate had one more card to play. Weeks later, I walked into my local bank to set up a savings plan. My folder of papers tucked under my arm. There they were, my mother and sister, seated at a loan officer's desk, dressed like they were auditioning for respectability. My mother's pearls gleamed under the fluorescent lights. My sister's blazer was crisp, too expensive for the story they were selling. I nearly turned away, but a spark of defiance rooted me to the spot. I stepped to the back of the line, close enough to hear my mother's polished plea. "We're just looking to refinance. There's no one else we can ask." The banker frowned. "No family support." My mother shook her head, voice low. "Just the two of us." I moved forward, placing my folder gently on the desk's edge. "Actually," I said, my tone calm as a still lake, "you had help, when 800 a month for 2 years, Bank of America, account ending 2074, transfers every first. The room stilled. My sister's face drained of color. My mother's mouth opened, then closed. The banker's eyes flicked between us. I laid down the documents, nodded, and walked out. The glass door swinging shut behind me. The late afternoon sun was warm, golden, like it knew I was free. A year after that bank encounter, I stood in a narrow townhouse at the edge of an older neighborhood, its creaky steps and crooked mailbox welcoming me like old friends. The keys in my hand felt heavier than their size, each one a testament to a life I'd carved from the wreckage. I'd signed the papers that morning, the deed bearing only my name, no co-signers, no strings. The driveway's weeds poked through cracked concrete, and the kitchen's linoleum was scuffed. But it was mine, a home where no one could push me out. I called Carol first, and she arrived with a thermos of coffee and lemon muffins, inspecting my cabinets with mock scrutiny. "Not fancy," she said, grinning. "But it's yours." I smiled, the words sinking deep. That's what matters. Work had become a steadier rhythm, not just survival, but growth. A new client, referred by James, led to side projects that padded my income, enough to buy a new couch, still secondhand, but chosen with care. I wasn't wealthy, but fear no longer stalked my days. I'd pack my lunch, a habit I kept not from need but from pride, each sandwich a reminder of my agency. The townhouse's silence was gentle, broken only by the hum of a kettle or the occasional creak of floorboards. I'd walk barefoot across the cool tiles, sip tea by the window, and feel the weight of my existence, no longer borrowed or bartered. Rumors reached me sometimes, carried by distant relatives who didn't know I'd severed the tie. The old house might be in foreclosure, they said. My sister's tuition payments were late. My mother was struggling. My father was distant. I listened without reaction, not from spite, but from a quiet disinterest, like hearing about a town I'd left behind. I didn't hate them. I simply no longer belonged to their story. Blood, I'd learned, wasn't a contract I had to honor. The suitcase still sat in my closet. Not a wound, but a marker of the day I chose myself. I'd open the door sometimes, see its clean lines, and feel not anger, but clarity. I hadn't lost everything that day, only the illusion of their love. My life now was small but deliberate. I planted herbs in cracked pots by the kitchen window, their green tips catching the morning light. I hung a thrift store painting, a lopsided sailboat on a stormy sea above the fireplace, its imperfection a mirror of my own. Carol would visit, her laughter filling the rooms, and we'd talk about nothing and everything, her hard candies rattling in their tin. The townhouse wasn't a dream house, but it was a home, its walls holding only the echoes I invited. I'd sit on the porch some evenings, the air thick with summer's hum, and think about the family I'd left. Did they speak of me? Did they claim I'd drifted away? Or did they rewrite the story to erase their choice? I pictured my mother staring at unpaid bills, sighing into her teacup, saying, things were easier when we had help, never admitting what that help cost. My sister, I imagined, still filled rooms with her complaints, her wants spilling over like an untended fire. I didn't need their confession. I'd paid their mortgage, kept their lights on, carried their weight while they turned away. My proof wasn't in their words, but in the life I'd built, the keys in my pocket, the emails I left unanswered, the home I owned outright. If anyone asked about the daughter who vanished, they'd have to decide lie or face the truth of who they'd pushed out. I wasn't gone. Not really. I'd simply stepped beyond their reach, into a world where my voice mattered, where my boundaries held. As I locked my door each night, the click was a promise, not a barrier. This was my life, and for the first time, it belonged only to me.